Hi everybody, hope you can hear me. Let me just mute everyone to make sure we don't hear any background noise. I just unlocked the waiting room for anybody who comes late so that they can get into the room. Let me lower down my cameras. Right, okay, thanks everybody for coming. I know you're all busy at the moment, so I appreciate your time. The point of today's call really is for people obviously to find out a little bit more about Lifecycle, what the point of it is, why agents use it, how it works, that sort of thing. So just to give you a little bit of an agenda as to how today is going to go so that you're not left wondering, you know, what's next. I'm going to do the first part in this presentation that I've got to really try and give you guys a bit of an understanding as to what the point of Lifecycle is, why we built it, and why we feel it's so important for a estate agency. Then I'll take you inside the system and I'll just give you a very kind of brief overview of the system really. What I don't want this to do is to turn into some sort of long-winded training session where we're going to the ins and outs of how minute details of the system work. I just want to give you an idea as to why it's important, how it works, and then show you the inside of the system. And then from there, you should have enough knowledge to know if this is a path that you're interested in exploring further. And if so, then, you know, Toby can maybe dig into some finer details or questions that you might have from some of the things that you've seen with me. And if not, then no problem, you know, nothing ventured, nothing gained. In terms of this presentation, the bit that I'm doing off of the system, I'll give you a little bit of background on myself, and then I'll try and just dig into the why behind Lifecycle, because it's not the same as most traditional estate agency softwares. So in terms of my background, I have around 20 years experience building up various different companies. I was an estate agent when I first left school, and so I've always had estate agency in and around my life in some way or another. I've got an attachment to that industry, if you like. So I've got a good understanding of estate agency, but my path took me off in a different direction. As I said before, I've spent the last 20 years building various different companies. I've built multi-million-pound businesses. I've written 2 best-selling books around how marketing works and how data works inside companies. And I've had the privilege really to work with some of the top entrepreneurs in the world. Why am I telling you this? Well, it all kind of links back to Lifecycle really. I looked across at our industry some sort of 5 years ago and could see a real problem coming for estate agency in terms of what's happened with every other industry and how every other industry has been disrupted by technology, by the likes of Amazon and Google and Apple and Facebook. I started to look at the way that estate agency was working, really just working as a middleman involved in, you know, taking someone's property, putting it on the internet, getting some interest in that property, and then sending those people round. And I started to look at how could we solve the problem for estate agents before one big giant came along and killed that industry. And so that's where Lifecycle was born from. It is a great piece of software, but what Lifecycle is really about is giving agents an actual strategy as to how they work. For most agents, they miss that part of their business. In fact, it's not just estate agency that misses that part of their business. It's most businesses. It's what I spent 10 years not realizing I was missing in my businesses until I managed to accidentally fall into that group of entrepreneurs that taught me what I was doing wrong. The strategy behind how are you going to go anywhere with this? How are you going to beat the competition? How are you going to remove yourself from this constant rat race of where's the next bit of business coming from? And for most businesses, their strategy revolves around just riding waves as they come in, like the previous one that we've just been through. And then when they die down, sitting down, scratching their heads and going, right, what are we going to do now? maybe they do some sort of action. Maybe they go and send leaflets, maybe they knock on doors, maybe they send letters to other agents' listings, but there's no ongoing strategy behind their business and how that works just as a constant, perfectly repeatable business. So Lifecycle was built not just as an estate agency software to do the usual things like book viewings, run chains, that sort of stuff. Lifecycle was built to complete the whole picture of what a business needs. How do you generate business by just doing your everyday work? How does that work? It certainly doesn't work in the current estate agency softwares. So to explain how that works, I just want to give you a little bit of a kind of overview of some of the stuff that I wrote about in the two books that I wrote. One called Where Did My Industry Go?, which was released in 2016, went on to be #2 business book in the world. And it was all about the change that's happened in marketing, why things are so different now, why just sending out leaflets when you need listings isn't going to work. If it does work, it will be a dwindling return compared with how it used to be some 10, 20 years ago. And as we go on through the next decade, it will just become completely useless. And the other book, The Estate Agency Revolution, was around data, which is a word that's used a lot online. If you're in any social media groups or any business groups, you'll hear that word bandied around a lot. But what does it actually mean? Is it as scary as it sounds? Like, how do we figure out what's useful data and what isn't useful data? So I want to just give you a bit of an overview of those two books and just kind of condense them down into a short presentation, and it will really give you an understanding when I do go into Lifecycle as to like, right, I can see now why my system doesn't do this stuff. So the first part was around marketing. And if we rewind back in time, pre-internet, pre-social media, how marketing worked was all about trying to find the active market. It was all about the fact that in your area that you cover, there are certain people that are looking to sell or let their property. You're an estate agent, they need your services, you need them. How do you find each other? Well, I'm old enough to remember how this worked. Some of you may not be, but if you just try to forget that the internet exists, as hard as that might be, the only way of doing it is physically putting letters through people's doors or leaflets or knocking on doors, or perhaps running a TV advertisement. They would really be the only major ways of reaching a mass amount of people and letting them know that you exist. TV advertising was out of the question for most businesses. And so therefore, companies used a method called interruption-based marketing. So the idea being, let's think about where people's eyeballs are drawn to. Local newspapers were popular at the time, national newspapers. Telephone was something that it was completely different back then to how it is now. You just didn't have a mobile phone, there was just a house phone. And if it rang, there was no caller ID, so you answered it. So cold calling was a good way of getting through to people. Putting adverts inside magazines, leaflets through people's doors. As I said before, if you could afford it, TV advertising in the middle of programs that people like to watch. There was no pause and fast forward of television or downloading box sets back then. So interruption-based marketing was the way to go. And it was really quite useful to people because, again, they didn't have access to the internet. They didn't have a way of doing their own research. So, in the middle of this picture here, you can see half price ham, I think that is, from Tesco. It's quite useful for people to know that stuff. They didn't have any way of knowing it. If you were looking for a washing machine, because yours had just started breaking down, and on the television you saw an advert for an award-winning washing machine, that was really quite useful information. You could then go to Curry's or PC World, Dixon's, whatever it was back then, Radio Rumbelows, and get yourself a washing machine without worrying about if you're getting the right one or not. So what you were told in these advertisements was really quite useful. You didn't question the information. You didn't have any way of questioning the information. As an estate agent, if you was to send out those leaflets to 20,000 local homes saying that you're an award-winning estate agent, and I'm looking to sell my home, and I happen to get that leaflet at the exact right moment, why wouldn't I call you? What else am I going to do? So then the messages only had to be very straightforward and simple, clear and obvious at the time. We're an award-winning estate agent. We take professional photography. We do floor plans. I'm thinking of selling my house. I see the leaflet. I think, great, this is just what I've been looking for. I call you, we have a chat, I put my house on the market. The problem with that is that if I get 3 or 4 of those leaflets that say we do professional photography and we do floor plans, it leads to a race to the bottom on fees. There's no USP. There's no way of me being able to decide, well, these guys said they're an award-winning estate agent who does professional photography and floor plans and really care about me. And these guys said they do professional photography and floor plans and really care about me and are also an award-winning agent. And these guys said it was going to cost me 1.5%. These guys said it was going to cost me 500 quid. So guess I may as well go with these guys. And this begins this race to the bottom over fees. So what's the other option? How have things changed now that the world has moved along? Well, fortunately, in about 2014-15, Google did a big piece of research called the 0 moment of truth, where they actually explained to people how their business model works and how any business model should work in today's world. It's a really interesting study. And what they did was they teamed up with some universities, and they also looked at all of the 15 years worth of browsing data that they held on people to see the journey that people go on and how the brain reacts to buying products. It's a really, really interesting study. I'd highly recommend it if you get an opportunity to read it. And what they basically found, first of all, when looking at the brain, they found that there's a part of the brain called the hippocampus, and it works like a bouncer at a nightclub. So if you think about all of the ad messages that you now see every day, you don't pay attention to most of them. There's a logo on front of the computer that you're using at the moment that you don't even notice. When you open the fridge, you don't pay attention to all of those logos. When you're driving, all the stuff you see on the side of vans, let alone the actual advertisements that you might see on the television or down the side of the tube stations or on billboards. You don't pay attention to most of these things. You also don't pay attention to most of the people that you walk past, their faces, what they look like. You wouldn't recognize them if you saw them again somewhere else. And even if someone introduces somebody to you, it's quite likely you're going to forget their name after a few minutes. So what the hippocampus does is it's working like a bouncer at a nightclub. Like I say, it's blocking out all of this kind of useless information that you don't really need. It's making sure that the information you do hold, the important information, isn't being too muddled with loads of random stuff. Then they looked at, well, how do you get past the hippocampus into the side of the brain whereby you have an emotional connection to something? And what they found was that you have to spend 7 hours with somebody, have 11 touch points, and meet them in 4 different locations. If you can do that, then it's just biology. The hippocampus opens up and you move over into this emotional side of the brain whereby I feel like I have a connection with that person or process. For any of you that, when you were younger, watched, I don't know, the film Grease 1 million times, you'll be able to recount the words from the songs, no problem, even though you can't remember sometimes what you walked into the kitchen for. So all of this stuff is really, it's a way of the brain being able to differentiate what's important and what isn't. It goes all the way back to caveman times, whereby if I see you in 4 different locations and you don't try and kill me, we can become part of the same tribe. Routes back to camp, if I do it a certain amount of times, I'll remember how to get there. And on it's gone through the ages. And now companies are able to use this technique to get people to remember them and move over into this known, like, trusted side of their brain. If there are companies that you like using, just think about for a minute how many hours or how many touch points you might have had with that company in the past, and you'll be able to see that working in plain sight. A great example of it is a company like Apple. So Apple very much work on this basis of 7-Eleven-4. They don't do many adverts that talk about the product. They do more emotional adverts. The most recent one I saw was a sound wave going through the country, and then just said the most powerful iPhone ever. Whereas a company like Samsung, although they've changed a little bit recently, traditionally do more product-based adverts that talk about the best display and the best hard drive and the best fastest chips and all of that sort of thing. And when you look at the numbers and the details behind those two devices, the Samsung has a better memory than the iPhone. It has a better display than the iPhone. It has a better waterproof rating than the iPhone. It weighs less than the iPhone. It costs less than the iPhone, and everybody buys the iPhone. So the 7-Eleven-4 process, it really begins to work. Then what Google did in their study was they looked at browsing data. So they started to see some amazing similarities in the browsing data. When people are looking for a product or service, they tend to go online and very quickly kind of narrow their search down to one or two products or services. So I'm looking for an estate agent in, I don't know, Epping. And very quickly, I stop that form of my search and start researching just one or two of the companies. And shortly after that, I narrow it down to just one of those companies, but I don't make any decision. In today's world, where I feel like I've got access to all of this information and stuff, my brain tells me, don't rush in, just carry on doing your research. Just check to make sure you've got this right before you make a purchase or a decision. And so when they looked at the browsing data, they found actually what somebody then does is they head off on this journey whereby they 7-Eleven-4 themselves on a particular company. They read their content, they watch their videos, they get sent emails, they see their Facebook posts. All of this stuff all counts towards it, seeing boards on the street. They're all touch points. They all go towards the 7-Eleven-4. And when somebody 7-Eleven-4s themselves, they then buy the product or service, and the price and the fee doesn't really matter within reason, provided the person can afford it. They just feel like, yes, I've made the right decision. Yes, I feel like this is the company to go with. You know, I'm sure you guys can relate with it. There'll have been a purchase you've made at some point whereby it just feels right. Just feels like now's the right time to buy that product or service. And if somebody really quizzed you about it, you wouldn't really be able to give them many logical reasons, although you would obviously try, because people don't like to believe that they're irrational and they make irrational decisions. So this process of 7-Eleven-4ing people is really, really key for estate agents going forward, because the majority of estate agents are still working in the old way of interruption-based marketing. And interruption-based marketing works less and less and less and less and less because other companies are 7-Eleven-4ing people for a longer period of time. So if you think about a simple thing like an instant valuation tool, for estate agents, that's always been sold as a lead generator. We'll put this instant valuation tool on our website. People might fill it out and then we can phone them up and see if they want to put their house on the market. But it doesn't work. The instant valuations give poor results that are not accurate. And when you phone people, they're not that interested. But if you just relate that with what I've just explained to you, it's because they haven't been 7-Eleven-4. They don't trust you yet, and they don't want to use you yet. And they're way back at the beginning of their journey. They're just inquiring. So what is useful is that they gave you their name and their email address and their physical address. And then your systems, don't worry how for the minute, but your systems should make sure that you just keep popping up all over the place for them. When they go on browsing on the internet, they see some stuff about your company. When they go onto Facebook, they see some stuff about your company. Obviously, hopefully they're seeing your boards when they drive around. And all of this process is beginning way back in time. So that when we come to 2022 and that person does think, you know what, I am ready to sell my house, and someone does deliver a leaflet at the last minute, there's no chance they're going to go with that company. You've already 7-Eleven-4'd them. They're like, no, I know the people to use. And the people make their own decision in their own time. They love to buy stuff. They just don't want to be sold to. There'll be plenty of things, if you think about it, that you're researching right now that you're not quite there with, but a little bit more content, a little bit more, a few more videos, a few more adverts, a few more bits that you see on the internet, and it will push you over the edge to buying that product or service. So how does that work? How do you 7-Eleven for people without it taking over your whole business? At the end of the day, you're there to sell and let properties, right? So you haven't got time to suddenly turn into Amazon. It works through something called centralizing data. So I said at the beginning, like, what's useful data, what's not useful data? Everyone's talking about data. I don't know what they're talking about. It's not that complicated. If you just look at it like this: centralized and distributed data, two different ways of working, two different beliefs, really. Distributed data is how a estate agency works at the moment. So you've got an estate agency software, no doubt, and it's probably a good one. Vibra, Repit, Desres, Dupix, they're all good systems. And that's one part of your business. Even though you might see it as the central part of your business, it doesn't particularly connect with anything else. You might have a few integrations here and there, but ultimately, that's where we do things like book viewings, load properties to portals, that sort of stuff. Somewhere else in the company, you might have an instant valuation tool, like I mentioned before, and that's where we get leads. And then you've got the portals that you advertise your properties on, and then you might have a email marketing system whereby you send out a newsletter every month. You might have a system that you use to send out market appraisal presentations. All of these kind of things are all different tools that are available in a estate agency, but they're all siloed into different sets of data. So if Mark Burgess has been sent a market appraisal through your market appraisal software, he also has a profile inside your estate agency software. And when I browse Rightmove, I have a profile with them. And when you send me my newsletter, I have a profile in that software as well. And these are all individual siloed databases that are not particularly connected to one another. So Mark Burgess exists 15 times inside this system. In fact, inside most estate agency softwares, even if I'm a seller and a landlord and a buyer and a tenant, I would have multiple profiles inside the one system. And that's how most companies work right now. A centralized data system is best summed up by a company like Google. Even though they're a technology giant, and obviously, we can't compare most companies to Google, the analogy is best summed up by Google. What Google have is they have what appears to be a distributed data system. They have lots of tools you can use. They have Gmail for your emails. They have Google Sheets for you to keep track of all your cash flows and, tasks and things like that. They have Google Hangouts for Zoom style calls. They have Google Maps for when you want to travel places. They obviously have their search engine, which people use to find things. They have all of these different tools. But at their end, behind all of that, they have a Lifecycle system, not our Lifecycle system, but they have what's classed as a Lifecycle system that centralizes the profiles of people using those tools. So, as an example, when I use their Google search, they have a profile that says, oh, Mark Burgess is looking at these things. He's wondering about coronavirus. He's thinking about how much he should be paying his staff. He's thinking how to find new staff. He's thinking how to, where he should go on holiday. Should he go on holiday? Shouldn't he go on holiday? What about his kids? What about his kids' education? All of these things. He's gathering all this information and storing it against my profile. Then what happens is when I use Gmail, it puts the same information on the same profile. So now it knows who I'm talking to and what conversations I'm having and what I'm talking about. Whenever I have conversations in Gmail, it's reading my emails and storing that information. Then when I travel somewhere, it knows where I travel and when I travel there and how long it takes and how often I go there. And it puts it all back on exactly that same profile. And when I use Google Sheets, it knows what I'm calculating and when I'm calculating my cash flow forecasts and all of that sort of stuff. Amazon's another great example. You just see Amazon as a shopping website, but Amazon store all that data against your one profile. From what you buy, they know if you've got kids. They know when you're going on holiday. They know what you've got in your house. If you've got a Ring doorbell from Amazon, they know who comes to your house and when they come to your house and how often they come to your house, and even what they look like. So because they store all that information against one centralized profile, what happens for someone like Google is they become the only company that can then put the right content in front of the right people at the right time. And companies pay them a lot of money to do that because they're the only people who can do it, because they've been collecting that data for 20, 21 years. So even if someone else starts a search engine, it's irrelevant. No one can beat Google. No one can take the advertisers away from Google. Google's the only people that have that data, and they're the only people that can put the exact right content in front of the exact right people to 7-Eleven for people at the exact right moment. So they can't be beaten. And as I mentioned before, Amazon's the same if you're trying to sell products, and Facebook's the same if you're trying to alert people to things that they didn't even know they wanted, and Tesla's the same, and Apple's the same, and all of these mega companies are built the same way. What we did with Lifecycle is we said, you know what? The death of a state agency comes from a company doing this. Could be Rightmove, could be Boomin, could be Zoopla, could be a brand new player, could be Purple Bricks, but somebody will centralize data on their contacts instead of just being a middleman. Instead of just saying, hey, I'll sell your house for you, I'll put it on Rightmove and then I'll do the viewings. Instead of doing that, they'll start collecting deeper data. They'll take their instant valuation data seriously. They'll promote that instant valuation for its true purpose, to gather data, to 7-Eleven for people, to own the market in the future and shut out all of the competition. They'll invest in systems that are going to do that in the background, just from them doing their everyday work. So Lifecycle makes that happen without you having to understand the intrinsic technology behind it. You do your everyday work. Okay, you maybe put a little bit extra work in as well, because you need to think about what messages are going to be communicated with people. But the system creates one profile for somebody, and then it puts all that information around them. So if someone does do an instant valuation, you don't really have to think about it. You don't even have to phone them. The system will contact them and say, hey, instant valuations are not that useful. Maybe you should have a face-to-face. They maybe will book in for one, maybe they won't. You don't have to worry about it. The system will continue to 7-Eleven for them, because the system does your instant valuation leads. It brings in all your ebook leads. It brings in all your portal leads. It automatically registers people from the portals, and it finds out all their information. Do they have houses to sell? If they do, it communicates with them automatically by email. They start seeing your stuff in social media. All of these things, every completion that you do gets a message every 365 days saying, hey, it's another year's gone by. Do you want to know what your property's worth? Every single thing that's happening around the outside of your company, through marketing, through transactions, through property registrations, instant vows, face-to-face vows, is all going into this system that's saying, well, hopefully you're going to get some business in the short term. That's your everyday stuff. That's what you're doing anyway. This stuff is going to make sure that it's scooping up everything else and building a business for you for the future, so that when you get 4 or 5 years down the line with this, if a new estate agent decides to open in your area, there is no competition. There's no way they can beat you. They can send out as many leaflets as they want. It doesn't matter. You've got all the data. You've been 7-Eleven foring everybody for the last 5 years. Your business is untouchable, just like Google, and it becomes incredibly valuable because of that. Because if anybody wants that 5, 10, 15 years worth of deep, important, useful data, the only place to get it is from your company, because you've put the effort in to get it. So going back to the beginning where I said it's not a traditional estate agency software, if you take a system like Vibra or Dupix or Repit, they've all got different screens, but essentially they're all the same. They're all trying to achieve the same thing. Lifecycle is different to that. Lifecycle is an entire ecosystem of different tools, just like the Google one that I spoke about. And the functions that you may use for everyday estate agency just form a tiny part of that. Book a viewing, chase a chain through to completion, register an offer, load a property to a portal. Yep, those functions are in there, but they're part of a bigger ecosystem. And that is a bit of a mindset shift for an agent, because a great example would be in our system, you can't book a viewing for somebody unless the property matches their criteria. So I had an agent that uses Lifecycle the other day that's only just started. They're still okay with it, but they were like, oh, this is annoying. This guy wants to book a viewing and I can't because it doesn't match his profile. In Dupix or Vibra, that would be easy. All I have to do is press the button and 2 clicks and I've done it. My response to him was, but your data's all wrong. The guy isn't in your system showing as looking for that kind of property. So something's not right somewhere. Either he's looking for that kind of property and you aren't recording the details, or he's not looking for that kind of property. Why are you taking him on the viewing? So Lifecycle doesn't let you cut corners. It's a data system. There's no point in putting completely shit data into that system. It's just no point. If you want to just sell houses as quickly as possible, book viewings as quickly as possible, get people around there, get the sales done and move on to the next one, Lifecycle is not the system for you. If you're trying to build a system, a data system, have a strategy so that you're out of sight of the competition in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, then Lifecycle is the way to go. But it's a mindset shift, because there will be things inside that system where you're like, well, this is harder to do than it was in Vibra. But the overall impact is that you have an easier life, because Lifecycle chases all the viewings for you. It chases for feedback automatically. It follows up with every market appraisal and stays in contact with them forever. It sends your newsletters for you. It posts your content for you. It does more stuff for you. But the process of completing stuff inside your database is more important than it was inside a system whereby I don't care about that. I just want to book the viewing. So before someone uses Lifecycle, their overall company probably looks a bit more like this, whereby they don't have that much time to think about strategy. They don't even really have that much time for sales and client relationships. The majority of their time is filled up with admin. And when I say admin, I'm talking about dealing with all the inquiries that you get from portals or just directly, having to register those people, having to qualify those people, having to follow up viewing feedback, having to chase up valuations. All of that falls into an admin perspective. With Lifecycle, we're trying to flip that around. And weirdly, as great as it sounds to say, oh my God, look, all the admin's been taken away and we've got all this time to spend on strategy and client relationships, it again is a mindset shift, because you can find yourself feeling a bit lost with like, no, I should be chasing up this, I should be chasing this feedback, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. It's just a little bit of a mindset shift. And obviously we help our companies go through that as well, which I'll explain a bit later. The overall overriding result of that is that the average Lifecycle agent's exchange revenue increases by 46%. How can we back that up? Well, 10% of our clients allowed us to have full access, whereby they gave us the information on what they'd done the year before Lifecycle from their accounts and what they did the year after they started using Lifecycle. And that's just the average. You know, some of them were off the charts, some of them were a bit lower, but it stands to reason that if you are covering a much larger group of people, it's not just the here and now. Your systems are working on people for the future. No lead is ever getting lost. Doesn't matter if someone makes a right move inquiry that once upon a time these guys would have never managed to get through to, but Lifecycle has managed to find out that they've got a property to sell. And they goes no further. They don't book any viewings. No one ever has any conversations with them, but Lifecycle continues to stay in contact with them, 7-11-4 in them. And a year down the line, because of that, they put their house on the market. Of course, that's going to have an impact on somebody's bottom line. Where I need to be clear about this is that Lifecycle isn't a magic bullet. You still have to have a reason that somebody would want to read your content. You still have to have a reason that somebody would want to use your company. You can't just say, I don't know, I can't really think of any reasons why somebody should use this, but you know, Lifecycle will figure it out. No, Lifecycle won't figure it out. Lifecycle will 7-11-4 people at the right time with the right information. You figure out the right information. So I'll come back to this in a minute, how we help you go through that transition. I'm going to jump out of this and go into the system just to give you a little bit of an overview. As I say, I don't really want to just, oh God, this is all a bit confusing. I just want to give you a brief overview. And if from what you've heard, from what I've said so far and what you see, it's of interest, then, you know, Toby or one of our team can give you a little bit more of a, this is the sort of nuts and bolts of it. But this is the inside of a system. I've got two accounts open at the moment, just so you don't get confused. I've got this one, which is a live account, a real agent's account, single branch estate agency. And I've got this one, which is just a test account, which I might use to show you some things if I don't want to, you know, mess around with this guy's account. So I'll just run through these tabs on the left-hand side without wanting to, as I say, go into too much detail and confuse you over everything, just to give you an idea of what's here. On this dashboard, we can see the basic stuff. This guy's how many market appraisals he's booked so far this month, how many they've attended, their instructions, how many instructions, their average fees, all of that sort of stuff. I've been working with this particular agent for quite a few years now. And when we first started working together, their average fees were 4,000 to 5,000, and he was absolutely adamant to me that there is no possibility whatsoever that he could charge any more than that. He was already way the most expensive agent in the area. So you can see here that, you know, that's changed, and that's not just down to Lifecycle, of course, but it's down to the principles of understanding 7-11-4 and not doing last minute rushes to try and find deals whereby ultimately the only thing you're going to offer somebody is a reduction on a fee. He can see the most recently active people in his database. I'll come back to that. He can see the basic information here around what he's doing this month. These are all of his market appraisals. So all the market appraisals that he's been out on over the past few years that haven't gone on to instruct him yet are all being shown here. So he's got 1.2 million pounds worth of business at the stage of, he's just sent them the proposal. He's got 1.2 at the stage of long-term prospect. He's got about 500,000 that have instructed a competitor, so on and so forth. It's all broken down here as to like what's happened with it. And again, I'll come back to that because that's a really quite a key thing. It's not just a pretty stat. It actually means something in Lifecycle because we're in an ecosystem. So we know who's active on social media, on your website, on your market appraisals, on your emails and all of that sort of stuff. Down here, the system's connected up to these portals. So you can see how many leads he's got that's come in from these different portals that haven't yet been dealt with. Again, I can go into leads and just show you how that works. But ultimately, the leads all come into this system. The system replies to those leads automatically and asks them all the qualification questions. And then your team have got this one centralized inbox where they can see who's verified, i.e. has answered all the questions, and they can go on and get their viewings booked, and who hasn't even bothered answering the questions yet. You can see an overview as to, like, you know, these different people and how they're getting on with their leads and all of that sort of stuff. Any upcoming market appraisal appointments. And then down the bottom here, he has a map of all these different statuses of what's going on in his area, where he's strong, where he's not. So if I just enlarge that for a moment and zoom in a bit, he can start seeing different things on this map. So he might filter it down to say, just show me where my instructions are versus where I've got people that have instructed another agent. And, you know, from that, he might decide where he's going to start doing a bit more targeted advertising on either social media or physical advertising, just to 7-11-4 a few more of those people and maybe start expanding into different areas. With all the tabs up, it obviously looks a bit, you know, a bit much, but as you start unticking them and then just ticking the ones you want, you can start to see a bit of a clearer picture. So if I just take some of these off, you'll see what I mean. There we go. So if he just wants to see, let's say, proposal sent, here we go, versus instructed a competitor, and then we zoom in on that, what he can see here is in this area here, he's got quite a few outstanding proposals, but there are also a few of these have instructed somebody, there's other agents have got properties on the market here from what he's, you know, from stuff that he's been out to see. So, you know, he might do a little bit more targeted here. He might also think to himself, well, I've got some good stuff going on over here, but not much going on next to it. So why don't I do some advertising here around the fact that I sell houses here? and start expanding his area that way. The things are just easier to see when you can see the data visually rather than looking at it in a spreadsheet. So that's an overview of the dashboard. You've got a calendar, which is pretty self-explanatory. I don't really need to go into that in too much detail. You can book viewings in there. You can book market appraisals in there. You can book just a general meeting in there, a holiday, sickness, that sort of stuff. What is probably worth mentioning about the calendar is that Lifecycle works on any device. So it doesn't matter if you're on a mobile phone or a tablet or a desktop. Everything works the same. So therefore, when you're out and about, you have access to your calendar. And if you went onto the calendar and clicked on an appointment, if we go to, let's just go to the calendar and I'll show you what I mean. So if I was on my mobile and I went onto the calendar, I could still see all the information, and I could go into the appointment, and from the appointment I could click this number and actually phone the applicant to see where they are, or I could go into their details to read a bit about them, or I could go to the property and then go to the owner and get their details up, and I could just do all of that from my mobile phone while I was sitting in the car if there was some sort of problem or I'd forgotten something or I needed some information. Contacts, again, reasonably self-explanatory, a list of all the contacts in the system. With Lifecycle, we try to create screens that give you the ability to do what it is you're trying to do somewhere, as opposed to, oh, I go to contacts and then I look on the contacts and then I find this information and then I can do that and then I can do that. So this really is just a phone book, just a list of all your contacts where you'd search for somebody if you were specifically wanting to find somebody just to call them for a reason. Properties, so you can see all the properties. The way that properties work slightly differently inside Lifecycle is, in most estate agency softwares, it's all about the property. And I can see why, because obviously that's the main thing for estate agents. But in most estate agency softwares, what you do is you go to the property and you send an email. But if you break that down for a minute, in everything that I've just explained to you before, properties don't have email addresses. Properties don't open emails. Properties don't have mobile phones. People do. So yes, this is the property, but we need to go to the person to send the email, because the way Lifecycle works is if, let's take this one, 12 Cavendish Avenue, if that comes on the market and the owner is, I don't know, Audrey Woodruff, and we sell it to somebody called Mark Burgess, the property will stay in the system. It will say Audrey Woodruff used to own it and now Mark Burgess owns it. So if I just went to the property to send an email, who am I sending it to? After 10 years, there may have been 4 different owners. So it's the person and a property are two separate things. There could be multiple people that are involved in that property somewhere. Next down, we've got the marketing section. This is a part that doesn't really exist in most estate agency softwares. This is where you create content. So we do give you free content, off the shelf content. It's really useful for most people when they first join Lifecycle, because most people aren't into the process of talking about their company much and understanding how to create content. And our coaches will help you learn that over time. But in the beginning, the free content allows you to just have that consistency. So we give you 4 free pieces of content every month. By content, just for those that are not clear, I'm talking about some sort of blog posts, top tips for a stress-free move day, how to boost curb appeal, this sort of stuff. Okay, so we give you 4 pieces of content. We build a blog for you that looks something like this. And let's go to one of these. There you go. So there's his content sitting on the internet. So we build this blog page for you that has all this useful content, and you can then attach that to your website so that people can click from the website to the blog, or from the blog back to the website. And we update that once a week with a new piece of content. That content then also gets put onto your Facebook page, your LinkedIn profiles, and your Twitter page, so that every single week there's a new piece of content that's going on your website, your Facebook, your LinkedIn, and your Twitter. And you start the process of 7-11-4 people. You can't 7-11-4 people without there being consistent content. So it begins. Now that is just free off the shelf content, as I said before. So it could be the same as, another agent out there somewhere. At some point in time, you'll move on to the stage of just creating your own 4 pieces of content every month, or however many you decide. What the system also does is it takes those 4 pieces of content and automatically builds a company email newsletter that goes out at the end of the month that, again, you don't have anything to do with. And that gets sent to all the contacts in your database, 7114, and everybody that's in there, whether they're an instant valuation, whether they're a portal inquiry, whether they're a market appraisal, it doesn't matter. All those contacts are going into this one centralized system. And so you've now got a piece of content going on your social media every single week, a new piece of content going on your website every week, and an email newsletter going out every single month, and you're not having anything at all to do with it. And that process begins. The process of 7-11-4 into people, the strategy, if you like. If I just go back to marketing for a second, you've got email templates. If you did want to send out some sort of mass email to people, that's easy enough to do. Journeys. So the way that nurture journeys work, again, based around 7-11-4, is there'll be a process that you guys might like to happen if somebody does a market appraisal with you. Once you do get to the stage of figuring out what your USPs are, why would you not want to highlight those over several touch points over several weeks after a market appraisal? In journeys, you can do that. So we set you up with a few journeys automatically. For instance, this one. All people that we've done a market appraisal for that then went on to instruct a competitor. They automatically go into this nurture journey sequence whereby the system will wait 2 days and then it will send this email. Sorry, you didn't instruct us. Here's a checklist for your home sale progression when your agent does sell your house. Again, it's just working on the 7-11-4 basis. We're actually proving more useful than their agent now. 7 days later, we're saying, here's what to do if your home isn't generating any interest. 7 days after that, we're saying, here's what to do if you're not happy with your agent. And this is all happening automatically. Every single valuation that you ever mark as instructed another agent just drops into that nurture journey, whatever that sequence is that you decide. This is our standard one that we set up for you, but you can customize this to whatever you want. Maybe you put a video here after 4 weeks, they get a video of you saying, okay, this is what happens after 4 weeks of being on the market with an agent. This tends to happen if you're having this problem, then blah, 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 blah. It just becomes an automated process in your company that happens every single time. You can build one for when you've just sent the market appraiser to highlight what's so great about your company, why so many people use you, some testimonial videos. We have one for if someone does an instant valuation, the system will automatically reply and say, hey, instant valuations are great, but they're not that accurate. They're just based on algorithms. If you really want to know what your home's worth, fill out this information. One of our team will come back to you. All just automated processes that you can start to build into your business, start reducing that admin work so you can spend more time on strategy. SMS, if you want to send a bulk SMS to people, obviously there's a cost to SMS. We don't charge a cost, but the carrier charges a small amount for an SMS. You can build web forms. So if you want to send surveys to people, maybe you want a survey to go to everybody who does a market appraisal, asking them what they thought. Did the person turn up on time? Did they find the person informative? Maybe you would just want to run a survey to all your buyers. Maybe you want to do an ebook where people fill out the form and they receive some sort of ebook as a way of gathering leads. You can do all that stuff using forms. The newsletter that I mentioned is automatically built every single month. You might decide that you want to change it slightly, and you can do that in there. So this is a marketing section. I'll come back to audiences because it's probably one of the most powerful things inside the system. Stats, it pretty much speaks for itself. You can use some useful statistics inside there. Leads is where I mentioned before, where we connect up to Rightmove, Zoopla, and On the Market, and any inquiries that come from those portals automatically get replied to. It doesn't matter whether it's 11 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock in the morning. You don't have to worry yourself with all these random emails coming in anymore. So if I go into this leads section, and let me just go to closed leads because there'll be a bigger list. So actually, sorry, let me go back to start with to where we started, leads. They can see that they've only got these 2 leads outstanding because they're the only ones sitting in the main inbox. So they're the only two left to be dealt with. But if we go to the closed leads, the ones they've dealt with over time, it might look like this one morning. These are all the leads that have come in from the different sources. So down here, we've got the key, Rightmove, Zoopla on the market, Pow, all of that sort of stuff. These leads have come in. Suzanne Scott has made this inquiry about 86 Peel Road, and she's verified. So what that means is that we sent her back the questions and she filled it out. The same with this person, Leighton Davis. He inquired about this flat, he's verified. So if we go into his details, then what we can see here is that from Rightmove, all he sent was, I'd like to view this property. I'd like to view this property, but I'd like to know how much the service charges are beforehand. Okay, that's fine. But now we also know that he just fancies changing areas. He heard about it through Rightmove. You would say maybe that's self-explanatory because he made the inquiry through Rightmove, but you'd be surprised. Some people say, I saw your board, or people like On the Market do a lot of advertising on Facebook. They might say, I saw it on Facebook. Do you require a mortgage in order to buy the property? Yes, and he's got an agreement in principle. Great. He's looking to move in the next 1 to 2 months. He's arranged his solicitors already, and he's got a property to sell that's already under offer. So maybe there's no opportunity for us to get the listing, but it could be somebody good to speak to, because it might turn out that sale falls through, and this guy might actually turn into somebody that whose house we could get on the market. Because of that, what you can see up here is the key is that Lifecycle has said not only is he a buyer, he's a potential vendor as well, because it's got a centralized system. We don't need Leighton Davis in the system 3 times. We just need one profile where it tells us all of his information. So that's leads in there. You can update leads. You can mark them as closed. You can book, do everything that you would need to do. Operations, in here you can send out electronic contracts. You can do the usual kind of stuff that you might do in a sales progression. So I won't mess around with this guy's account, but if I go to my test account, if I'm still logged in, let's have a look. Yeah, so you get the idea. In here, you can see all of your sales that you've got tied up and how you're getting on in terms of getting them through to exchange. If you go into the detail of it, you can see all the milestones. So we've sent the memorandum of sale now, and it starts filling up the percentage complete. You can leave notes, you can send out a memorandum of sale, you can do all of the things that you would expect to be able to do, put together a chain if you need to know what's going on in the chain, all of this kind of stuff that you can do inside sales progression. All the way through to exchange of contracts. When it completes, then what the system will do, I think I mentioned it before, is it will then send an email every 365 days to the new owner saying, hey, another year's gone by. Would you like to know how much your property is worth? And that property is now just marked as a potential in your system. So it's kind of gone full circle. When someone does an instant valuation, they're a potential. That guy who sent an inquiry to view something, he's got a property to sell, he's potential. Then you've got people that you've sent market appraisals to. Then you've got people that are on the market with other agents. Then you've got your own instructions. Then you've got everybody going through sales progression. And then when it's completed, it's going full circle back around to potential again. So your database is building. That's what I was saying about the Google effect. Over the years, you can't be competed with. You've got the details of everybody. You're 7-11-4ing everyone. One quick thing I want to show you, so that gives you a pretty good overview of the functions inside the system. One quick thing I do want to show you is the automated registration and matching and how that works, because it's really quite clever. So when you mark a property as available inside Lifecycle, it'll automatically put it onto this property search page that we create for you. And we really use this page for the process of property matching. The way property matching works at the moment for agents is very clunky. Because it's so clunky, when you put someone in your system, it's most likely that all you do is put in a maximum price and a number of bedrooms, maybe an area, a general area, and then they kind of get sent random stuff, really. Because of that, people tend to spend all their time searching on portals rather than agents' websites, because the portals, they can be a bit more specific, so they don't give their details to the agent until they're ready to book a viewing. We're trying to reverse that power and bring it back to the agent, because if the agent holds a database of people looking to view, not just people that have made inquiries from portals, but people that are specifically looking to view properties urgently rather than portals holding that database, the power goes back to a estate agency. I need an estate agent now. If I'm looking to sell a home in Epping and you have all the people that are looking for houses in Epping, people that are not even necessarily using the portals, then I need you. So what we did was we built something called dynamic property registration that allows people to register directly into your database without you doing anything in a very detailed way, and they can update their details whenever they want. So it's called Heads Up Property Alerts. You advertise it on social media, you put it in your window, you tell people about it, the portal responder tells people about it. And what you're saying to people is, look, have you ever missed out on a property before? Have you ever been looking for something, found the perfect thing and find it's already under offer? Or maybe your estate agent didn't tell you about property because it was slightly outside of your criteria. Well, you never have to worry about that again, because at our company, we use something called Heads Up Property Alerts. It uses artificial intelligence to take your criteria and then automatically keep you updated to properties you might be interested in before they even hit the portals. In the same way that Netflix lets you know about shows you might be interested in, and Amazon lets you know about products you might be interested in, our system works the same way. Give it a go. So anyone who's serious might think to themselves, okay, that does sound interesting, I will give it a go. They click here and they say, I'm looking to buy. So let's put in Miss Hayley Smith, and her email address is that, and her mobile number is that, and her postcode is that. So she looks for a property and goes, yep, it's that one, ticks the GDPR consent, saves her details. Now we get onto the property side of things. Rather than just having a tick box saying I'm looking in Essex, or I'm looking in, London, these big wide ranging areas, Canterbury, Birmingham, you can put in any location you want in this system. You could put in a specific school if you wanted to. Say, I need to be within 5 miles of a school, and the system is using real world locations. So this person is, we're going to say, wants to be within 5 miles of Margate Station. I can enter other locations if I want to. And we're going to say they're looking for a flat. Their minimum price is 120,000. Their maximum price is 250. They want a minimum of 2 bedrooms. They're going to leave the rest of it. And then over here, we've got the qualification questions. This makes life a lot easier because you don't have to have arguments with people now about whether they've got a mortgage, whether they've got a house to sell. They're going to give you all the information. This person's doing this themselves, as I say, at 11 o'clock at night. So why are you moving? Downsizing, looking to move now. I haven't sorted my solicitors yet. How did you hear about us? I have a property to sell that's not yet on the market, and I need a mortgage that I haven't arranged. Now, when I click register, for most agents, either they don't have anything like this on their site, or when they do, that's the end of the process. But on our system, what happens is when I click register, the person automatically gets taken to a page that shows them the properties that they might be interested in. And it's a very, very clever system. It doesn't work like usual estate agency softwares. What you can see here is that it gives the percentage match. It's clever enough to know not to show flats to somebody looking for a detached house. But what it will do is it will work slightly outside of the criteria. So whilst we can see these ones are a pretty good match, this one's just outside. She said her maximum price was 250, so it's only a 96% match, this one, because it's a bit more expensive, but it is a 2-bed flat, it is in the right area. As we start going down the list, we can see this one's only a 65% match. So we're showing more properties to people without looking stupid, because this person may well like this property. It's in the right area, it is a flat, it's in the right price range, it's within 5 miles of the station, but it's only 1 bedroom, not 2 bedrooms. Now, this supposing that this person thinks to themselves, actually, you know what, I know this block, I really like these flats, I might be interested in this, and they click and have a look at it. What happens is this person's in your ecosystem. So if we now go on to that test account that I had open, then we search for Hayley Smith. Here she is. So she's in your system. No one in your company's had anything to do with her registration. She registered herself. The green dot tells me she's live right now. She's on our website. So she's a buyer. The system's also identified she's a vendor, because remember I said I've got a property to sell that's not yet on the market. She was last active a minute ago. If I go into her profile, I can see all the usual things that I would see. Contact source was online registration. This is when she came into the system. This is her details. There's no notes on her or anything yet. Has she had any related market appraisals? I'd be able to see it here. But if I go to her search profile, not only can I see all the stuff that she filled out, I can see the potential properties that could work for her, again, based on a percentage match. So the team have got a bit more of a wide range of properties to talk to her about. But I can also see here, potential viewings, what ones she's clicked on. So that property that was only a 65% match, for some reason she clicked on that. And I now know that she's worth speaking to. What's more likely is that registration and plenty of others are happening automatically without you really paying much attention to it. So you don't really know that Hayley Smith's come into the property specifically, but instead you're on 16 Grosvenor Place, the property, thinking, I really need to get some viewings booked on this. And down here you can see potential viewings. These are the 15 people that have all looked at it. Hey, there's Hayley Smith, who was looking at it today. And so on and so forth. All of these people have looked at that property. So I know where to go to get viewings. It doesn't have to be pot luck anymore. My life can be very precise. We can start setting up processes of getting properties on the market, putting them in the system, going home, coming back the next day, looking at the potential viewings, getting the viewings booked, getting the property sold. It doesn't all have to be so random anymore. Market appraisal is the same. We go on the market appraisal. We know what's going to get sent out afterwards. We know this, we know that. So one last thing that I want to show you here is around the, going back to the dashboard. Actually, I'm going to go back into the live account for this. So we could see here that this particular agent, one branch, has got £3 million worth of fees that he's nurturing going back over a few years. How do you know who to call to get your next market appraisals? You know, if everything I've been speaking about is true, then surely the right market appraisals, the ones that are about to come on the market, are not the people that you've just been out to see, but they're probably people from a bit longer ago. So how do we know who to call? Who are you calling at the moment to try and get market appraisals? The people that you went out to recently? Or the people that you went out to 3 years ago? Are you just calling from A to Z? What this guy's able to do is he's able to go into here, long-term prospects. He's got £1.2 million worth of potential business sitting in there. Because these people are in an ecosystem that's tracking them, we know when they're looking at their market appraisal report, which I've got a market appraisal report up, looks something like this. This was the market appraisal report that Lifecycle generated for him, that's sent over to the person. We know when the person's looking at that market appraisal report. We know when they're looking at your website. We know when they're looking at your content on social media. We know when they're looking at that email that goes out every single month. We know all of that stuff. It's constantly live. The system is alive. It's changing all the time. So if he goes to this list here of his long-term prospects and puts them in order of their last activity, what you can see here is he can see all the people that he's done market appraisals for that are long-term prospects that have been active recently. And the most interesting thing about this is that number one on the list is a market appraisal from 2017 who was active an hour ago. Next on the list, someone from 2017. Next, 2018, 2017, 2020, 18, 20, 19, 18, 20. All of these are the people that he should be speaking to try and get his next market appraisals. And none of them are within even a year, I don't think. Maybe that one is within a year. But the majority of them are long gone from agents' callback diaries. No one is thinking about calling Mr. Derek Gorge from 268 St. Barnabas Road, who had a market appraisal back in 2018. In most agents' books, he was a complete and utter waste of time. But here he is, 3 years later. If I go into his details, I can go to his timeline and I can see everything that he's been doing. He's just been looking at one of our sold near you emails. So when you set market property as SSTC, it sends an email out to people within a certain radius saying, hey, we sold another property near you. We really need some more. We can see every email that he's looked at. We can see every piece of content he's read. We can see every Rightmove inquiry he's made, every newsletter he's looked at, every click he's done on our website, everything he's done all the way back to the beginning of time when we did this appointment for him in 2018. So again, this starts linking back to your content. If the content you're creating is, here's some interior design tips, and Derek Gould was reading it, doesn't mean a great deal. It's good that he's reading it. He's 7-11-4 in himself, but it doesn't tell you much. But if you had a piece of content every month that gave you an insight, maybe the 4 things you need to know if you're thinking about selling your house this year, and Derek Gould was reading that, suddenly your life becomes a whole lot easier in terms of like, you only need to make 20 phone calls to these 20 people, and you're probably going to pick up 4 or 5 instructions. So I hope that gives you a pretty good overview of the system. With about an hour, I've managed to keep it within an hour, I think, maybe just over. So I've probably taken up enough of your time, and I've probably given you enough of an overview for you to understand if this is something that you want to do. There's so many benefits to Lifecycle. I can't tell you, but to balance that out, it requires a mindset shift. You have to be willing to be accountable. At the moment, companies they're not accountable. They don't have a strategy. So they take what comes their way. And if there's not enough coming their way, they give it a go and they do their best and they work hard. With Lifecycle, suddenly you're accountable. And we have elite performance coaches that will make sure you're accountable. So we have this data map process whereby our team will set up your whole account. They'll get the whole thing going. They'll build the whole account for you. You don't have to start figuring anything out. But then you start working with one of our elite performance coaches who will hold you responsible once a month for, okay, let's talk about this. What are you doing around content? They'll help you. They'll guide you, but you have to do the work. So you can't just go, I'll give it a go, and then 6 months later go, I never did anything. It didn't work. It does work. There's no question it works. We didn't make up this idea. There are thousands of companies building multi-million-pound businesses using systems just like this. It works, but it requires work from you too, and a shift in the way you're thinking. If you want to book a viewing quickly by clicking 2 buttons and you don't care about the data, Lifecycle is not the system for you. If you want a strategy and a process and something that you can look at and go, we're building something whereby we can't lose and we're going to put the effort in to do it, 100% Lifecycle is for you. And there are hundreds of agents out there that you can talk to that are using it that will back up that claim. We have a Facebook group called Estate Agency X, all about the future of estate agency. There are plenty of Lifecycle users in there if you need some independent verification on that. Hopefully that's useful enough for you guys. Hopefully it's what you needed to know. It'd be great to have you on the journey with us. We truly believe that the users of systems like this are the future of estate agency. The rest of estate agency is heading towards a big problem whereby they don't have their own vital systems. They're reliant on, at the moment, people say, oh, you've got to be on Rightmove, or you've got to be on Booming, or you've got to be here, there, and everywhere. And as those portals become stronger and stronger, the value in the estate agency becomes less and less. These systems are built to reverse that. You own the data. You have the system. You want to be able to go to somebody's house. If we go back into this guy's account, you want to be able to go to somebody's house and say, okay, Mr. Jones, you've got this property. Let's have a look for an available property. Hold on a sec. You've got this property here that we've got. You've got this property. We want to be able to go to him and say, I've got 72 people. I've got 72 people that match that exact location, that exact type of property that are looking right now, that are fully registered. I've got all their details that I can tell about that property this moment. Why would you not want me to do that? These people are not even necessarily on the portals. They're not even necessarily registered with the other agents. They registered with me to find out about properties before they hit the portals. So you own the data. You're valuable. And the more that you do that over time, the harder and harder and harder it becomes for any other agent to break into that circle. Vice versa, if another agent's doing it and you're not, the harder and harder and harder you're going to notice your life start to become. As we're seeing with agents like this that have been using this system in his area now for 3 years, the other agents are starting to scratch their head and go, why are we not even getting called in on these listings anymore? So anyway, hope that makes sense. I'm always happy to answer any questions directly that anybody's got. The best place to find me is probably Facebook. Add me on there, send me a message or drop me an email. Toby will be in contact with everybody after this anyway, just to get your initial thoughts. You have to, be honest with him. It's much easier for both of us if you was to say like, oh, that's just not for me, or, you like it. So yeah, hope that was useful, and hope you all have a good rest of the day.